So, you know the story we're always told about India, right? It's the one you see on the news and those big investor presentations, a really neat, super positive picture of a country on the rise.
And the first thing they always point to is this: the GDP is up, the economy is booming, the numbers are climbing. This is like slide number one of the official success story every single time.
And then, of course, there's the stock market, another big, shiny number that's always going up, proof that everything is heading in exactly the right direction. Just green arrows as far as the eye can see. And it's not just the big stuff. Even our own social media feeds are shouting the same message, right? It's just a constant flood of hustle culture, positive vibes, telling us all to just grind harder and think bigger. But here's the thing. If all the charts are going up, why does it feel like everyday life is kind of stuck? That's the real question, isn't it? It feels like there's this weird lag, this buffering between the official story and what we actually experience day to day. So for this explainer, I say we peel back those layers. Let's look at what's really going on behind the headlines. All right, let's start where the national conversation is supposed to happen, on our screens. This is where the story gets really, really loud. You know, what's so fascinating is that the big political fight today, it's often not about left versus right or this ideology versus that one. No, it's way more basic than that. It's a straight up battle between making sense and just making noise. It's where the person who shouts the loudest gets to win. And this just nails the formula perfectly. I mean, we've all seen it. Tune in to any primetime news debate, and this is what you get. You've got 5 panelists, 1 anchor, everyone's talking over each other, and after a whole hour, how many actual answers do we have? A big, fat 0. It's not a debate, it's a performance. This quote right here just says it all. The goal of the debate is clear. It's not to solve the problem, it's to mute the opposition. In other words, the point isn't to find a solution. The point is just to drown out the other guy. It's a shouting match. And all that high decibel energy, it just spills right over into our politics. I mean, think about it. Election season feels less like a serious democratic exercise and more like the IPL, doesn't it? You've got the huge crowds, the flashy slogans, the team jerseys, and of course, a whole season of totally unlimited promises. Which brings us to the manifesto. What does that become? Pretty much the political version of, trust me, bro, next time, paka. It feels less like a solid plan and more like a casual promise that, yeah, we'll definitely get to it next time, for sure. Okay, so let's switch gears. Let's turn down the volume from the outside world and talk about what's happening inside our homes. Let's talk about the economic reality, what we're calling the squeeze. Wow. I think this might be the most perfect definition of the Indian middle class I've ever seen. You're stuck right in that gap. You earn just enough so you don't qualify for government help, but nowhere near enough to actually hire someone to figure out your taxes. You're basically on your own. So let's follow the money. Where does that monthly salary actually go? Well, before you can even dream of saving or investing, these 3 giants show up and take their cut. First, rent, the big one, eats a massive slice. Then, taxes take a hefty bite, and whatever little is left over, inflation just slowly nibbles it all away. And all of this economic pressure, it creates this very unique kind of confusion, especially for young people. They're so talented, they're ambitious, they're connected to the whole world, but they're also getting hit with some wildly conflicting advice. I mean, just picture this. You scroll on Instagram and it's all, be a risk taker, quit your job, launch that startup, go for it. And then the very next conversation you have, your family is telling you the complete opposite. Get a stable government job, security is everything. It's enough to give anyone whiplash. But you know, after all that advice, after all the noise, what does the job hunt really boil down to? Often it's just this one simple question. Bro, do you have a referral? It's that stark reminder that sometimes it's not about what you know, it's about who you know. The referral is king. And all of this creates this very modern weekly cycle of anxiety. Sound familiar? You start the week, you're scrolling LinkedIn, looking for jobs. By midweek, you're on Instagram, scrolling through everyone else's success, which either motivates you or completely tanks your confidence. And it all leads up to that classic Sunday night fear, just dreading the start of another week on the same old hamster wheel. So after all that noise and all that pressure, it is so easy to just feel cynical. But to find the real story, we have to do 2 things. First, we need to really see what all that noise is drowning out. And second, we have to listen for what's happening in the silence. So what gets lost in the shuffle?
Well, it's the really big, fundamental problems that never really go away. Our farmers are still struggling. Our cities are literally suffocating from pollution. And our public transport is stretched way past its breaking point. These things are always there, even when they're not trending on Twitter.
And here's a really important point. The reason these things get pushed aside, it's not because people have stopped caring. It's because people are just tired, genuinely exhausted from the daily grind, from the financial squeeze, from all that political noise. It's really hard to fight for big systemic change when you're just trying to make it to the end of the month. And that exhaustion, it leads us to this huge misunderstanding. We start wanting change to be like a 30-second Instagram reel, fast, exciting, and easy. But real, meaningful democracy just isn't like that. It's a long process. Sometimes it's boring, and it takes real, sustained effort that goes way beyond just a hashtag. And yet, and this is a really important and yet, that feeling of exhaustion is only half the story. Because if you can look away from the main stage, away from all that noise, and listen closely, you'll find that something really interesting is happening in the quiet corners. This is what I'm talking about. It's a kind of quiet revolution. You see it in small towns, where people are dreaming just as big as anyone in the big cities. You see it with online creators who are just bypassing the old gatekeepers and building their own audiences. And you see it in countless people who are just quietly, without any fanfare, building businesses and communities and finding solutions on their own. And maybe that's the real story, right there. India isn't some neat and tidy success story. It's messy, it is incredibly loud, and it's full of contradictions, absolutely. But the one thing you can never, ever say is that it isn't moving. All this chaos, all this noise, all this struggle, maybe that's just the sound of a country that is profoundly, intensely, and beautifully alive.